Perfect. I'll hand over to Kate now.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. I'm talking to you from the perspective of retrofitting in practice. So what might this mean to you as a householder? Now, as Ian explained to you at the weekend, retrofitting is about doing things to improve existing buildings to make them as energy efficient as possible. And what's important is to take a whole house approach to retrofitting a property. So looking at your home as a whole and as a system. It's been mentioned a few times, I think, that it's important to take a fabric first approach. So the first step is to really help your home retain as much of its heat as possible. Dealing with damp is important because damp is not good for a house. And as the climate changes, there may need to be one may need to think about making sure that guttering and things like that are adequate for increased downpours. Ventilation is very important, making sure that the air is changed regularly within your home and that the air is fresh. And once the fabric has been improved, it's at that point that it's appropriate to think about renewable heat and hot water systems, importantly with the right controls. The aim, particularly from a homeowner, is to have a warm and healthy home, which, as this says, costs you less to heat and is as close to net zero as possible. You may have heard people talk about energy performance certificates, or EPCs. So these are the current way of understanding the energy efficiency of your home. And you need an EPC when your home is sold or for private rental and when certain retrofit work is done. If you're not sure what your EPC is, then you can look it up by using the link here. So the best homes are at EPC A and the worst homes are at G. And within Devon, we still have a lot of homes that are in the E, F and G category. So there's quite a lot that needs to be done to those. So thinking about, as a householder, your journey with retrofit. This is an example and a kind of excerpt of the way that it may proceed. So first of all, a household survey would be done, a whole house survey would be done, and it's generally important that you're part of that, so you understand what's going on and you can interact with the surveyor. That will lead to a retrofit plan, which is like a menu of works, which lays out the various measures that are needed for the home. And they should also identify the order of the work that should be done, again, taking into account fabric first. And depending upon the work that's required, there may be more or less detailed design work that follows from that. Of course, it's important to determine how the work can be paid for. So this may be from somebody's savings or from taking a loan, various government schemes, or some sort of hybrid. And this is one of the challenges. And it's not necessarily necessary to do everything at once. Depending upon your plans, it may be a 15-year plan, or it may be something that's done in a few months. And once it's clear what you want to do, then choosing installers to do the work and then being supported through that process. As Dan showed, my figures are slightly different, but they're more or less the same. Homes use a lot of energy, and space heating is one of the most significant uses of energy. So reducing the need for space heating is really important. This gives an idea about reducing heat loss. It's a bit busy, but a key message here is that heat will always try and escape to the coldest places. So if we can get to a point where as much of a home is insulated as possible, then that reduces the number of cold surfaces, so therefore it reduces the amount of heat that can escape. So you have drafts, and managing drafts is important, but some airflow is important. And you'll see here that your roof and your walls tend to be the areas where you get most leakage of heat. So loft insulation is a fairly inexpensive, relatively speaking, inexpensive measure. If you have a room in a roof, that will take more work, and a flat roof also requires a different technique. Walls are more complicated, and Dan talked a little bit about this. If you have cavity walls, particularly if they're easy cavity walls, then that's a fairly straightforward measure these days and reasonably low cost. External wall insulation is where your house is wrapped with a new covering. Internal wall insulation, Dan mentioned, is trickier to do. It depends on the sort of property, and there's also party wall insulation that can be done, and the approximate cost of that is around about £450 a wall. Windows also can lose a lot of heat, so looking at double and or triple glazed windows and insulated doors with draft proofing, and a rough cost is probably around £650 per window for double glazing. And floors can also be insulated, and there's less heat that's lost from the floor depending upon the sort of floor. Ventilation and management of damp is very important. It's not just important for your health, but also for the health of your home. And ventilation is important for managing damp. And it's important to remember that damp surfaces and walls take more heat to warm up. So if you are in a damp home, then you'll lose heat in trying to drive off the damp before you can benefit from that heat. There are different ways of improving ventilation, from simply keeping windows open from time to time, or room fans. Hydrostat is triggered automatically based on humidity levels in rooms like kitchens and bathrooms, to whole house ventilation systems, which can be very expensive. Renewable heating and hot water should be considered once the fabric is improved. The reason for that way around is that once you've improved the fabric of your home, the heat demand of your home will be less. If you upgrade the heating system before your fabric is improved, then you'll end up with a heating system which is too big for your needs, and that will be less efficient. There are some approximate costs here. So a heat pump system may be approximately £12,500. A solar system on the roof to help with the electricity costs and support hot water, approximately £5,000. Or storage heaters may be a solution. Modern storage heaters are more effective, but this also assumes that they're fed using renewable energy from the grid. Heating controls and heat emitters mustn't be forgotten. So good heating controls are essential to managing heat effectively and efficiently. And it's really important that as a householder, you really get to grips with heating controls. So we're talking here about things like thermostats, programmers, and thermostatic radiator valves, which are on radiators. Heat emitters are the things that emit the heat into a space, and these include radiators and underfloor heating, and they need to be sized to enable the heating system to be as efficient as possible. So for example, a heat pump is able to operate at lower temperatures, but if the water is going around your system at a lower temperature, it generally means that you need, for example, a larger radiator or underfloor heating where you have a larger area that the heat is coming from. So one of the things I was asked to talk about was an average house, retrofitting an average house. But my question would be, what's an average house in Devon? There's all sorts of housing types or stock across Devon. Solid wall homes, there's the Cornish units, which were built just after the war, terraces, a range of homes that were built from the 1950s to the 2020s, as well as all the homes that were built in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. Big, small, in all sorts of different locations, and every house is individual, although same types of homes can be similar. We've already said that retrofitting is needed at scale to meet Devon's climate targets. And retrofitting can be less expensive if groups of properties are done together. So a consideration is to look at whether or not groups of houses can be treated together or in different ways. We were also looking at a rough kind of guide price for a whole house retrofit. Well, again, to some extent, you could say how long is a piece of string? It will very much depend on the type of house. We've provided a couple of examples here for a terraced house and a semi-detached house, a small semi-detached house, to give some idea of how the costs might build up. So this is just an example and an indication for you. So here you'll see loft insulation that may already be done or may not. This is an example showing external wall insulation. It's showing a slightly more expensive figure than Dan suggested. It very much depends upon the property, including party wall insulation, the cost of replacement windows and suspended floor insulation. So this would be for a particular property, the cost of improving the fabric. And then there's the cost of the renewable heat system, which may include solar panels. So for these properties that we've suggested here, we're looking at an average price of around, average cost of around £45,000 to £50,000. The last thing I'll show you is a similar example, but with cavity wall insulation instead of external wall insulation. So here you'll see that the simpler measure of cavity wall insulation, assuming that it's relatively simple to do, brings the costs down to around about 30,000. So I hope that you start to see from this that the cost of individual properties will depend very much on those properties and what's already been done, what they need. And these figures also, I think, don't include ventilation. But I hope that this has given you an opportunity to perhaps think about things from your perspective of a householder. And I hope that you found that useful.
Great. Thank you very much, Kate.